everybody. This is Chaplain Gilliam coming at you live again from my office. This time you got me standing up because I feel like I'm about to get into some stuff. And this isn't necessarily going to be like word of encouragement. It's more like my random thoughts at the end of the day. I want to start this series called A Road to Emmaus. And I'm gonna do a little background later on what I mean by that. But this idea that everything that happens in this life ultimately starts to point back to God and Christ and how life and reality, ultimately everything is, it leads back to Jesus. So stay tuned for that. I'm gonna be doing some additional videos on that kind of stuff. And today, this is gonna be the first one because I got an opportunity this weekend to talk to some of our airmen about this idea of the conscious, and in particular as it deals with dating. And so this idea with the conscious is that, not that looks and personality and all that kind of stuff, not that that's not important, but when you talk about a person's conscious, what their internal workings look like what's that internal conversation look like, that becomes one of the main markers of what you look for in a potential mate. So I was having that discussion. We were all over the board talking about different stuff. We were talking about is there gray areas with right and wrong, or is right and wrong just a black and white thing? And we start to be creative in how we can logically bypass what we know to be right and wrong. So we had some good discussions, man. I mean, a lot of good discussions. And I've been thinking about it ever since. Like it's been on my mind constantly. And the reason is because my brain, mostly because I'm a pastor, everything goes back to Jesus, man. Everything goes back to Christ. And one of the main scriptures that came up in my mind as I was thinking about this was this passage in Romans 1. So Romans was written by this dude named Paul. If y'all not familiar with the Bible, Paul was a theological beast, man. Like, if you guys know who Ben Shapiro is, he's kind of like the biblical Ben Shapiro. Like, he's just hyper intelligent, knows all this stuff. He was a genius from a young man, and then he had this encounter with God. He had this encounter with Christ, and it completely changed his life. And he went from trying to stomp out this Christian thing, because originally Christianity started as a Jewish cult. He was trying to stomp it out as best he could, but then he had this encounter with Christ himself, and it completely changed him. He went from persecuting Christians, throwing them in jail, having them murdered, to actually being a Christian and being a leader in the Christian church, right? And so Romans, he writes this letter to a bunch of Christians in Rome, hence Romans. And this is his magnum opus. Like this is his big letter. This is all of his knowledge and studies of culture and how culture intersects with theology and all this stuff. It's like crammed into the book of Romans. And he starts off in Romans and he just punches you in the face. If you ever get a chance to read Romans, it is highly logical. It weaves you through, like I said, the intersection between culture and logic and theology and God and all this kind of stuff. So this has been on my mind because I'm talking to these folks and I'm hearing these conversations. I'm hearing these different worldviews, and I'm like, how does this intersect with God? And I want to make sure that I'm in my job, that I'm representing God in the right way. You know what I mean? Chaplain and all. And so I come to Romans, and I want to read this to y'all because I want to talk about the importance of a conscience, and in particular, like when you bypass your conscience enough, or when you, as Paul would put it, when you suppress the truth, when you suppress in your mind what you know to be true about life, when you start to push those things down in favor of, well, I just want to live my life a different way, what that starts to do is it starts to, the Bible uses the language like you have a seared conscience, like you know things are wrong, and then all of a sudden God just kind of lets you live in the wrong. And then all kind of mayhem ensues. All kind of mayhem ensues. And this is what Paul was kind of getting at at the end of chapter 1 in Romans. Let me read this to you. So this is Romans 1. I'm going to start it in verse 28. It says, "And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They were full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They're gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil." So you can't even do normal stuff. You got to make up new ways to do stuff. Inventors of evil, it says. Disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. Oh man, this is such a deep passage, because Paul's talking about once you for so long you're engaged in gossip, you're engaged in slander, you're engaged in boastfulness, like you know all these things are wrong internally. Paul later in some other sections, so he writes this letter to Timothy, and he's talking about how a person should be able to, like, God should be speaking to a person's conscience. Like there's certain things about the human experience that we know things intuitively. It talks about that elsewhere in Romans, how we know what's true about God. Like it's plain and evident to us. Like we can look in creation and know that there's God out there. And because we know there's God out there, we know he made us a certain way. But when we start to suppress that truth for lies, when we start to, put in another way, when we start to suppress what we know to be true and acting in a way that we know is truthful, all kind of mayhem starts to ensue. And this says God just gave them over to it. It's like one of the worst spots you can be in is to be a person that routinely suppresses reality, what they know to be true, in favor of living a false life. So as I was talking to the folks upstairs, I was telling them there's a way that a person could live that the more you suppress the truth, the more you start to inch forward to almost being a sociopath. So a sociopath is someone whose conscience doesn't speak to them. So when they do wrong, they don't see anything wrong with what they do. So most of your historical sociopaths, you got your Hitlers, you got your Pol Pots, you got your Jeffrey Dahmers, and all these kind of folks. They did wrong and nothing clicked inside of them. After a while, maybe it did at first, I don't know. But after a while, that thing inside of them that says, this is not okay. This is not a good thing to do. I shouldn't be doing this. That internal voice, that ability to look into the mirror and say, I don't like the person I see in the mirror, that thing is gone. And when that thing is gone, the Bible uses the language of a seared conscience, literally meaning cauterized, or all sensitivity has been burned away, or suppression of the truth. Psychologists might say that you've given up on your conscience and will call you a sociopath. The more we suppress the truth, the more we inch further into being sociopathic. The Bible makes the case that people who fail to acknowledge God for who he is almost turn themselves into sociopaths. In the dating arena, if you're with a person who never takes your feelings into account, who never apologizes when they're wrong, when they do a no call, no show, they never offer up an apology. It's just who they are. That person's conscience might be seared. That person might be inching closer to being a sociopath. I don't know about any of you. I would not want to be in a relationship with a sociopath. It's just, maybe that's just me. Not that those people can't be redeemed. Not that we don't believe in the love of God. Not that God can't take dead souls and bring them back to life. Y'all, I'm a Christian pastor. All dead things are capable of being brought back to life by the holiness of God. Trust me. Like I love the fact that God brings dead things back to life, and a seared conscience can be unseared when the power of the Holy Spirit comes upon a person. I'm not saying any of that. But you as an individual don't have the power to bring a person's seared conscience back to life. It's not within your power. People who live this way, they live a way that's full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness, gossiping, slandering, hating God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventing new ways to do evil. Those kind of people, when you're out moving and shaking in the world, and you have those kind of people around you, and you look back and you look at them, there should be something inside of you that says, I don't jive with that. That is your conscience being healthy. Surrounding yourself with people who have those things in mind. That's my thoughts for the day. There's a lot of folks that was hearing what I was saying, and they were like, man, but we have all these, we got all these what ifs, and we think right and wrong is more gray than it is black and white. And man, I just don't think life jives that way. Life jives in a way where right is right and wrong is wrong. Just because we can come up with reasonings of why we can bypass, or because we're comfortable with kind of violating some of those wrongs. One of the folks brought up speeding. So through central Nevada, once you get outside of the bigger cities and stuff like that, and you're driving up the road headed to the next bigger city, man, there's some places where the speed limit is like 80. And there's some folks, I'm not going to tell nobody, but some folks go way past 80 because they don't want to be in central Nevada. They just want to get to their destination as quick as they can. Some folks kick it up to 100. Like they're trying to get past this blank space through just desert Nevada, right? Some folks love it, some folks don't. And one of the folks asked me, so is that right or is that wrong? I'm like, well, it's wrong. They're like, but there's nothing out there. I'm like, yeah, but just because you're okay violating the law doesn't mean the law doesn't exist. The law is there for a good and healthy reason. Right is right and wrong is wrong. Let's talk about your conscience a little bit. Because if you never say to yourself, if you're always saying to yourself, I'm okay violating what I know to be right, the more you squish that and never give it a second thought, you start doing that in other areas of your life. Not that speeding through central Nevada is going to sear your conscience. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're living in a way where you never give it a second thought, ever, that what you know is wrong, you're just doing, and you never give it a second thought, yeah, your conscience might be starting to get seared, and you might want to go back and revisit, look yourself in the mirror and say, how's the rest of my life doing? How am I doing in other areas of my life? Am I suppressing the truth in other areas of my life? Am I bypassing the law in some other ways that I'm not overly comfortable with? That's for your journey. I don't know what each individual is. I know I got mine. Like I was telling those folks upstairs, there's certain stuff where you know things are not right, and you have to fight against them, and that might be breaking the law. And so you have to wrestle with those things in your conscience. But your conscience is one of those things that it's one of those things that makes us human. It's actually because Christ was the ultimate of that. Here's how we're going to get our way to Christ, right? This is our road to Emmaus. Christ is the ultimate manifestation of man. He's the only one who has truly fulfilled what it means to be man. And so, though he might have done things in his life that were against the law, some of you might raise your eyebrows like, whoa, Christ did things that were against the law. Sometimes Christ violated the law, but his conscience was sure that he was honoring God with everything he did. Everything he did, every decision, every action, every reaction was as if God were living on earth. He was the ultimate manifestation of God. Jesus is what it means to be truly man. And so, as we're looking at this, because Christ did see fit to acknowledge God, God was actually with him in every decision he made. So he wasn't out there being unrighteous and evil or covetousness or covetous or filled with malice and inventing new ways to do evil. He wasn't foolish or faithless or heartless or ruthless. Like he wasn't any of those things, because his conscience was so on the up and up that he lived his entire life in a perfect way to please God. Jesus is the fulfillment of what we see here. Where we fall short, Christ steps in the gap and lives it perfectly. And because God is looking at this and he's judging this, we stand judged before God. And now we need a way out, because I don't know about some of y'all, but there's some of these things on this list that I struggle with. Being insolent and haughty and boastful. There's a lot more that I struggle with that I don't even want to admit to myself. And if you're like me, man, like we're in some real deep poodoo, if you will, to use a Star Wars reference. We're in it. We need some help. And the help that God gives us is to send his son to live a perfect, morally righteous, conscious life on our behalf. It says, anyone who believes and trusts in me, I will take all of the righteousness that I accomplished, and I will function as if they actually did it. So that when you step in front of the Father, when I go to God and I say, here's the case for so-and-so, he looks at your record. The only thing he's seeing is my righteousness. He's not seeing all the times when you were faithless and foolish. He's not seeing any of that. He's seeing all of my righteousness. And man, what good news. What good news that when we go to face the ultimate judge, who judges not only our actions like an earthly judge would, he judges the intent and character of our heart. So even the good things we did are under scrutiny because we probably did them with some kind of mixed reaction. God is judging it all. And Christ was the only one who lived with a perfectly moral conscience that could take his moral conscience and accredit it to us. Whew. Man, that's some good stuff right there. That's some good news. That is beyond good news. It's the best news in history. And for a lot of folks that were engaged in that conversation, we kind of had to cut it short. So I wasn't able to get it to some of the places where I wanted to take it. But my main thing that I want to make sure people live in is that they have this wrestling of these questions, that something is trying to drive them to a healthy conscience. And especially in dating, like if you're with somebody that you can just tell like something's off with them, they might have good dating skills, they might have good communication skills, they might have good relationship skills, y'all might be jiving, they might be good looking and all this kind of jazz. But some of the worst people in history had good communication skills and good people skills. And they were using those to mask the fact that they had no conscience. And history has paid the price. Don't be that person that gets into some entanglements, right? So I'm taking it to some other stuff that's going on in the news. Don't get entangled with some folks that are morally bankrupt, that routinely violate their conscience. Because you can't be that person's conscience. Only the power of God can be a person's conscience. So that's my random thoughts for today. Hopefully y'all enjoy. Tell some folks about these random thoughts. If you disagree, let me know. Like, hit me up in the comments. Give me a call. Some of y'all got my number. We can talk about it. We can meet up. Any of that stuff. But it's much love. These are my thoughts as a pastor. Let me know what y'all think. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that stuff, so that we could try to get this YouTube algorithm going. But I love y'all. Hope y'all having a good day. Grace and peace.